Are we all adjusted? I guess so. Good.
Well adjusted, Rick.
Well adjusted, that's right. Well, Myron, you have written a sumptuous book. It's sumptuous physically, and it's also very rich in terms of its content, and some of it quite surprising. But let me start with the devil's question.
Oh.
We've had a founders revival going for 20 years. We've had big books on all the big guys. We are getting books on the lesser known figures. Why do we need another one?
Well, first of all, it's beautiful, as you say. You will see the 32 pages of very expensive color plates in it. But it seemed to me that one of the things that people hadn't really looked at that as carefully as possible with the founders is their ideas. They were brilliant, very thoughtful guys who had, some of them had read very widely, some of them had a very wide experience, and the founding came out of a worldview. I mean, that's why I wanted to tell the story as biographies. I wanted to ask the question, not just what did these guys do, but who were they, what did they think, what was driving them? And I was impressed that there really were sort of three large themes that they were concerned about. One was they had a thirst for liberty, the way that, that people who know concretely what its opposite is like. The way that Eastern Europeans who had finally escaped from communism understood what liberty was. And that's because so many of them were descended from dissenting Protestants. The Pilgrims were just the first of them, but then for 150 years, there were Presbyterians, Baptists, Quakers, and others.
Huguenots.
Coming from Europe, Protestants in Europe who were escaping the persecution of the Catholic Church. And this was very much a living memory for them. So they knew that they had come here seeking religious...
For a reason.
Yeah, and they weren't going to let go of it. They just weren't going to let go of it. Then there's that tragic paradox that we all know is at the center of American history. They lived amid slavery. And
that was everywhere.
It was everywhere.
All of the 13 colonies.
Even John Jay had a couple of slaves, as he was president of the Manumission Society. I mean, it's...
how many people are doing something bad that they're not doing anything about to end? Go on. I just had to respond to that ripple of laughter.
Well, but even the slave owners, as you well know, knew how obscenely unjust it was. The smart ones, Thomas Jefferson, said that an avenging God would take action and show that the world is not governed by blind chance in a passage that, you're writing what will be another great book about Lincoln right now. And you just told me you were writing about the second inaugural. You read this just as Lincoln revivified Jefferson in the Gettysburg Address, talking about how all men were created equal. So he revivified him in the second inaugural, and in that statement. And
Jefferson didn't often speak about avenging gods or God at all.
No,
but that issue drew it out.
That issue drew. If there were a God, this was something he would be concerned about. Jefferson believed.
Right.
That's for sure. And so when now comes to be George III comes to the throne, this 22-year-old martinet who has succeeded his grandfather, George II, who ruled for 30-odd years. And he starts messing with his North American colonies in a way that, you know, all through the Walpole era, the Pitt the Elder era, nobody had messed with America. And George Washington and many other colonists looked out and thought, oh, we know what's happening here. George Washington said he wants to make us as tame and abject slaves as the blacks we rule over with such arbitrary sway. And it took George Washington said this, and it took George Washington a lifetime to understand the full implications of what he was saying and free his own slaves on his deathbed. So they made a revolution for liberty, and I wanted to make clear just how, you know, from the very, very beginning, from the Zenger trial in 1735.
Here in New York.
Here in New York, where so much of the great events of our history happened. From there on out, the colonists were concerned about liberty. They had hewed this country out of wilderness, and they were going to run it themselves.
Now tell us who exactly you're focusing on in this book. You've got 6 figures in a family.
Yes. Well, and the reason for that is because my wife Barbara and I took a trip to Virginia just kind of on a whim to go and see the founders' houses. We, you know, at our advanced age, you'd think we would have done this many times, but we never had. And it just knocked my socks off to go down there. You walk into those houses, and it's like you're walking into the presence of these guys. It's like they're haunted, and you feel that you know, a place like Monticello, you feel you know the man who built it. So who do I deal with? Well, my gimmick is that it had to be somebody who had a house that's open to the public that you can visit, because I wanted people to have some sense that these were not mythical figures, but they were living human beings who, as the review in the Wall Street Journal said over the weekend, who had mortgages, which they couldn't always pay off, as you wrote so eloquently about Hamilton. So that was kind of where I made the cut, and the other great cut I made is I left out John Adams, who has 2 houses you can visit, because he's been written about now so many times that I figured nobody needed me to write about him. So I wrote about William Livingston, who was a signer of the Constitution, and important because he ran a magazine here in New York in the 1750s that was the, you know, John Adams, who I left out of my book, said that the American Revolution, the real American Revolution, happened 15 or 20 years before the shots rang out at Lexington and Concord. It happened in
a civilian's remark.
Yeah, well, that's true, and an intellectual's remark, because he said it happened in the hearts and minds of the Americans, and if you want to see how they changed their affections and their ideas, just look at the literature, the pamphlets, or the sermons even, of the last 15 years or so. Well, he didn't go far enough back, because the place where it really started was with William Livingston's magazine in New York called The Independent Reflector. And he wanted to model it on Addison and Steele's Spectator.
So is this a weekly, monthly?
It's a weekly, which he mostly wrote with the help of a couple of friends. And it started with a fuss about establishing Columbia College. And it then turned into this sort of geopolitical, you know, global political theory lesson in which he taught to all of America